I'm going to talk to you, as it says on the screen, about the participation of the Quebec City Irish in World War II, and it's a very personal presentation in the sense that a lot of it is my own opinion, and refers to a lot of people I've met. Obviously, I wasn't in the Second World War, and but looking around, most people are younger than me. A few are older, but regardless of whether or not we were in it, we were all certainly marked by it.
Dyeing your hair to look.
That's right. Oh. I dye my hair white so the wife won't feel bad. Part of the from Erin go Bra to Volans and Velans, this refers to the slogan underneath the hat badge of the Hibernian Cadet Corps, which gave up their hat badge to adopt the hat badge of the Royal Rifles of Canada, with whom they affiliated around, well, actually in the late 1930s, but the hat badge lingered for a short time after that. I want to bring to your attention that Quebec City in 1939, 1945 was not the same city as it is now. Very different. Even when I was a child, I was born in 1947, and I remember after you went past the 2 blocks after Belvedere, you started seeing old rural type mailboxes. You know, Huey Bullock had a cow out at St. Patrick's Cemetery. You know, beyond McGuire Avenue, it was a field. That's a mosaic that was created of Quebec City in 1948 by Laval University of aerial photographs. And they stitched them all together, and they came up with this. Now, the Irish were sprinkled out throughout the city. But look at the city here. St. Foy is open. That's the Plains of Abraham here, the field. A lot of Irish in there, inside the green oval. That's an aerial view of St. Patrick's Church at the time. The whole block. Okay, this would have been the old cemetery. That's the school. See the faded shamrock up there? That was all there was to the school. That was St. Patrick's Church. It was just a basement church. St. Bridget's home beside it. That's the rectory. And back here you have the recreational center, sports field, for what it was. And this is a close-up. This would have been what we call now René Lévesque, was called Saint Cyril. That's Clairefontaine. That's Scott Street, where you had a lot of Irish. That's Conroy Street. Artillery, St. Patrick Street, O'Connell Street. There were other streets there that disappeared. St. Julia, St. Michael, Berthelot. Some of the streets there that were much longer. There still is a bit of St. Patrick Street. There's a bit of Scott Street, but they were longer at that time. And there were plenty of Irish used to live in there. You have to understand, to the population, the Irish population, I guess, was around roughly 5,500. It had held steady since about, it used to be around 12,000 back in 1865, but it's kept on declining as a lot of Irish immigrated further west or down to the States looking for work. By 1921, it was about 5,000 something, and it seemed to hold steady there. After the Second World War, it took a plummet. This is the first sign within the Irish of Quebec City that there was a war going on that I could find in the documents I had in the offices of Irish Heritage Quebec. St. Patrick's High School were publishing a publication called the Patrician Herald. It was a little booklet. Gradually it became a newspaper, and finally around 1958 it morphed into a yearbook. They used to put the pictures, the mosaics of the graduates in the newspaper before they had a yearbook. And I came across this, and this 15-year-old boy is writing, Ryan Hanrahan, and I don't know where he gets the idea because he's only a 15-year-old boy, and he's talking about the Second World War. He's gone back to school in September, obviously, of 1939, and war has been declared. And he sees it, or he says that he sees it as a continuation of the First World War. Now, some of us who've looked into that, studied it, we've seen that a lot of people blame the vindictiveness of the Treaty of Versailles as setting the stage for a second round with the Second World War. But of course, that on top of the rise of fascism had a lot to do with it. There's more to it than that. But this is the first sign I came across of it. This is in Easter of 1840, and they were already talking about the fact that many of the old boys have joined the Army or the Navy, or what is starting off as the Canadian Air Force. And the whole issue is dedicated. There's a lot of dedications within that edition to the young men who are joining the forces. The boys, of course, in the school are not up to joining the forces right away, although some do in no time at all. You have to understand that it takes a while for the war to get going, particularly for the Irish in Quebec City. They declare war in September of 1939. September to March 1940, they refer to it as a phony war. There's not much fighting. There might be, along the Maginot Line, there might be a little testing, sorties to check. But then the German army moved in June of 1940. France falls. There's Dunkirk. It's only at the end of 1941 that the Irish in Quebec City experienced their first casualties at Hong Kong. A lot of, because St. Patrick's was affiliated with the Royal Rifles, a number of the boys had gone into the Royal Rifles. I think of, I remember I interviewed Joe Sutcliffe. Joe was in the Cadet Corps, in the band, and the trainer suggested to him that he join the band of the Royal Rifles, and he did. It took a while because his parents wouldn't give him permission to join the army, but soon enough he did. You have a picture there of In 1941, earlier in 1941, well before December, of the Royal Rifles in Quebec City, which became part of C-Force, which was the part of the Royal Rifles that was sent off to Hong Kong. And a lot of them didn't come back. And if they did come back, they were not necessarily the same men. The little insignia there is from the Hong Kong Veterans Commemorative Association, and if you go out to St. Patrick's Cemetery, or any cemetery in Quebec, you may see that little logo on the tombstone, and you'll know that it's a Hong Kong vet. Some of you from the parish, if you had people in the Royal Rifles, might wish that I'd be able to identify some of the men in the Royal Rifles. They're standing in front of the drill hall that I'm sure you're familiar with, but I can't identify them. Nobody can identify them. There's a fellow, a historian, working with the Voltigeurs and the Royal Rifles, and he'd like to identify them, but he's had no luck. The Patrician Herald became a newspaper. And this, again, this edition is March 1942. And you see, lest we forget, and you see the boys have gone off to Hong Kong: James Martin, George Martel, Joe Fitzpatrick, Charles Fitzpatrick, William Tuppert, John Kilso, Patrick Comerford. And there's another fellow in the back, not in the Royal Rifles, it's in the Air Force, in the back of that newspaper. Father, these are the two, the clergy. The rector of the parish at the time was Father Patrick John Gallery, and he was very dedicated to, I suppose, Canadianization of the Irish within his parish, because the Irish in Quebec City were quite nationalist. This talk is about World War II, but I wouldn't put my hand in fire on this, but from looking at what I've seen, my take on it is that somebody from the Irish community of Quebec City was 6 times more likely to join the forces than he was during the First World War. They simply not, they didn't have certainly didn't have an imperial attachment. But gradually, with time, they were Canadianized. And this process, I believe, picks up and strengthens during the Second World War. It started during the First. It helped that Ireland gained its independence in 1921, but it certainly strengthened during the Second World War. So if you go through this whole edition, you'll find tributes, and you have to understand that it's really the old boys who are the staff putting this newspaper together. They do have reporters from the different levels in the high school, and they put little articles in there from them, but it's the old boys putting the newspaper together. You can see that from the names up on top. Brother Fidelis himself, the guy on the right, he was one of my principals way back, because he kept around. Beg pardon?
Was he nice?
Oh, yeah, he was all right, you know. Yeah. All these guys, like I remember the name is Stuart Mackay and Matt Dempsey, Jimmy Halpin, Paul Brown. So they're old boys on staff. Dudley Egan at the time, I didn't know that guy, but he was the president of the old boys. And they're all encouraging the boys to, to be patriotic. And here you can look after I have the honor roll from St. Patrick's High School for King and Country. You wouldn't find the slogan that often in the newspaper. They'll more likely say pro Deo, pro Patria, for God and country. (1939), Father Gallery, who was very, very patriotic, very patriotic Canadian, and of course there was no Canadian flag at the time. It was the Union Jack was all over the place, and some of the parishioners would remark this, but Father Gallery did his best, and he had this cross that's currently now out at St. Patrick's Cemetery. He had it installed in front of the rectory of St. Patrick's Church, the big St. Patrick's Church that used to be on Grand Allée. And unfortunately, that church caught fire in 1956, and that's a picture you see on the bottom. And the church, it stayed there until 1988 because they built a new church on top of the old basement church. And finally, when they took down the 1988 church, they moved the cross out to the St. Patrick's Cemetery. But the whole idea of the cross was to commemorate the sacrifice of parishioners in joining the fighting forces. It now stands in St. Patrick's Cemetery. The principals at St. Patrick's High School during the Second World War were Stephen Primo, whose picture you saw in the previous Patrician Herald, and later on William Henchy, who I remember, Brother Rayfield too. I remember him sending me home one day. I told you it was a personal presentation.
What did you do, Joe? We all wonder.
It could have been one of many things. I couldn't tell you. And I wouldn't tell you. The Tupperts. So I'm going to go from family to family because a lot of the stuff I have up is from pictures that I put up of servicemen, because people who follow me or Irish Heritage on Facebook, I told them that I would giving a presentation and that I would feature their people if they sent me in their pictures. Some did, some didn't. And I knew I'd hear from my friend Tuppert, because he's heavily involved with the Hong Kong Veterans Association. And his family were in the Army. William was taken at Hong Kong and became a prisoner of war. So he came back very, very thin. His brother, Herbert Jr., was a company sergeant major with the 22nd, and he ended up in the Italian campaign, going up through Sicily and Italy. And surprisingly, because my friend was talking to me about Herbert Sr., and I said, surely that guy can't be in the Second World War, but sure enough he was. He's in his World War I outfit here, but he was still training men in the Second World War. That's Herbert's father. He's with the Royal Rifles. And of course, he was an older man, and he wasn't sent overseas. So each time I refer courtesy of Jerry and Richard Tuppert. These are the guys who send me in their pictures. This very sad. I knew Patricia Fitzpatrick. She used to be on the St. Patrick's Day Committee with me way back in the 1970s. And her brothers, whom I'd never met, were killed. One was killed in Hong Kong, killed in action, and the other fellow became a prisoner, and he died in a Japanese coal mine at age 20. And Joe Fitzpatrick died when he was 18. He was 16. Sorry? Yeah, he was 16 or 17 when he, back in 1939 or 40, when he submitted a poem to the Patrician Herald of the time. And the name of the poem is called The Slacker, which is kind of misleading because the slacker was a term used for people who were unlikely to join the army or the forces. But he doesn't really talk about that when he gets into the poem itself. He just talks about being on sentry duty and the things, and he ends up by saying, the last couple of lines, he says, I've been a young fool to have left my school, but my mind's in the possessive cry shall always be, let youth unite in order to fight for that which is right, democracy. Which is okay for a 17-year-old boy writing, okay? On the back of that, this is another fellow killed in action, Anthony Maher. And again, you see among one of the ads, somebody pays just to put in, remember Hong Kong. The boys used to go out to get subscribers and subscriptions from different business establishments in Quebec City to support the newspaper. And as far as Hong Kong is concerned, well, bad news comes dripping slow. Okay, so as late as 1944, somebody gets a message that their son died in another coal mine. Or he was stevedoring. He dies in mining coal for the Japanese. It occurred to me that there'd probably be a lot of Irish guys anyway at Quebec High School who served in the Second World War too, because not all the Irish kids were at St. Pat's. So I got the yearbook from Quebec High School in 1945, and sure enough, you see all these names: Breakey, Daly, Buchanan, Corrigan, Devlin, Devine, Dinan, Doherty, Dolan, Donovan, Duffy, Dunn, Egan, Fitzgerald, Fleming, Gilpin, Hannon, Hanrahan, Henchy, Hughes, Jordan, Kelly, Keogh, Lyons, McWilliam, McDonough, Mooney, Murphy, O'Neill, O'Regan, Robinson, Rourke, Ryan, Somerville, Sullivan, Todd, and Wart. So you might be surprised that there were that many Irish at Quebec High, but I wasn't really surprised myself. Another place I found reference to the Irish, Quebec City Irish at war was every year at the, they'd put on a St. Patrick's Day soiree. They used to have St. Patrick's Day matinee soirees at the Palais Montcalm, and they'd publish a program. And in the program, you'd usually have a message from the mayor, you'd have a message from of course, the rector of St. Patrick's Parish, and this one and that one. And of course, during the war years, you would find reference to the war. And you see, slowly it changes over the 5 years. I notice at least some changes during the by the end of the war. The St. Patrick's Literary Institute is not putting on the show anymore. It's because it's folded up. So again, Patrick Gallery is talking about these three loves. Our Lord, Mother Mary, and St. Patrick have taught us to know our religion, how to love our Emerald Isle, and how to serve our country, Canada. So everything's in threes. He has the shamrock, and he refers to his three sources, and he refers to what they're to know and love. Then later on, 1941, this one's 1940. 1941, Canada moves up ahead of Ireland, okay? So from Father Gallery's point of view, this is an improvement. He's working. Okay, may all of us always love Canada, love Ireland, love our faith. Here he is again. This is in 1942. And they still have the old insignia on top with the Erin-go Bragh that you'd find on the Fenian flag, but soon that disappears. And again, it's kind of curious to look at the wording he uses in his address, you know. God bless Canada with a victorious peace. In each Canadian of Irish extraction, if each Canadian of Irish extraction would pray more earnestly and more frequently, he would soon see a God-given peace. If each of us would work such, and so on. And look at the next paragraph. If we would enlist, okay, that's what he's trying to get the boys in the parish to do. A lot of them are. Some of them aren't. Some of them are too young or too old. Some of them, I suppose, don't want. This is in 1944. And this, now Father Gallery has moved on to some other parish. And I remember I never met Father Gallery myself. You know, I wasn't born yet, but I do remember Father Call. He was a nice old man with white hair. And he was very much milder, I take it, than Father Call. Father Gallery, not that he wasn't a patriotic Canadian, but he just wasn't of the same enthusiasm, I suppose. Okay, may the graces and blessings willed by St. Patrick to his spiritual children be showered in abundance upon Irish hearts today. Of course, it's St. Patrick's Day, so you have to make allowances for the day. In his day, St. Patrick won a bloodless victory over paganism. May he intercede with God in heaven to bring to our boys in the armed forces and to the world a complete victory over the pagan influence which has brought about the present world conflict. Okay, and you see another message from the Premier of Quebec at the time. The last paragraph. French Canadians, as well as all other groups in this province, find it very easy and pleasant to cooperate with their Irish fellow citizens at the time. You're moving into a period at this time where it's a little stressful because the Canadian government had promised that there would be no conscription. And then they said, well, conscription if necessary, but not necessarily conscription. And then they started conscripting them. And the ministers in Quebec, of course, didn't support the government, including an Anglophone minister like Chubby Power. He resigned on the grounds that the government had broken its commitment. 1943. Now, initially, as I say, a lot of the Irish boys of the parish went off and fought, and from Quebec High. Like I know the one from Quebec High who died there, Dave Somerville. The next thing that where we took a lot of casualties were Sicily and Italy. The invasion of Sicily, July the 10th, the 11th, 1943. It was a very hard war. They land down here. Unfortunately, the capital's up here, Palermo. And instead of immediately cutting off German retreat, the Germans had carried out a very effective retreat into Italy. The Allies won Sicily, but the American and the British commanders were in competition to get to Palermo first, and it would have been wiser just to cut off the German retreat, because as it happened, they had to fight the same German army all the way up Italy, and it was it took an awful lot of casualties. Charlie Hutchings used to work, I know him well, I used to sing with his son, and Charlie used to work in the rectory, in the office, you know, he was a very gentle man, but he'd been to Sicily. Tom Mullally lived down the street from me on Moncton Avenue. His daughter sent me his picture. He transferred from the Ordnance Corps to the 48th Highlanders while in England. As the Canadian Army was preparing and training for the invasion of Sicily, this is what Barbara sent me. And the Italian campaign, all was very hush-hush. They weren't told they were going to Sicily until they were on ship going through the Straits of Gibraltar. Didn't have a clue. A lot of guys here were in the Ordnance Corps, and Ordnance Corps looks after equipment that the Army is going to use. And they switched into infantry units where they'd actually be in combat. Frank Feeney, I know a guy from St. Pat's, graduated a little older than me, who graduated from St. Pat's. Frank Feeney and his wife Dale was in class with my sister. And his father, again, was in the Ordnance Corps, but when he got over to England, he switched into the Irish Regiment. The Irish Regiment was based in Toronto, but it was an infantry regiment. And he went on to fight through Italy, France, Germany, see his... Frank still has his father's battle dress top with his medals. You see these medals, if you wonder what they are sometimes, you see the ones with stars, okay, refer to different areas where they were fighting in Europe. Like there's an Italian star, you can tell by the ribbon on it, it's red, white, and green, like the Italian flag. And there's a French and German star, there's an Atlantic star, and that's the way it works. His brother Thomas also served in the 57th Locating Battery, which might, if you're from Quebec City, it might ring a bell to you, because the Cadet Corps at Quebec High School was affiliated with the 57th Locating Battery. Why, I don't know. I could never figure that out, because the 57th Locating Battery, their headquarters was over in Levis. And, but they used to, you know, read the Royal Rifles hat badge. They had a kind of a cannon on their hat badge. And they quickly became when they actually got into action in Europe. They became a tank unit. The Cullertons, I met Cecil, talked with him often, and knew him well. His brother Clem, I'd seen, but I never really got a chance to talk with him. I don't have a good picture of him, but I have an arrow pointing to him. He's in the Pioneers. Clem was an ebonist, a cabinet maker, so he was skillful working with wood, and assault pioneers would go ahead with the infantry and help them with bridges and everything they needed, but they were very close to the firing line. This is obviously St. Patrick's Day. Seth is standing on Scott Street, because the Cullertons used to live on Scott Street before they moved out to Silbury. Anybody who identify with living in Silbury probably lived within that green oval that I showed you earlier on, because, and again, you must remember around I don't know, I guess around 1968, 67, they knocked that whole area down. You know, O'Connell Street is underneath the Place Quebec, and there's a little butt end of St. Patrick's Street left, but St. Michael Street's gone. It's all gone. The Italian campaign continued into the spring of 1945, but the Canadians did not participate in the final victory. They were told as they were pulling out, they're heading for France. So they head for northern France, or Belgium, really, and Holland. Because most of France had already been taken, but they had to clear out Belgium and Holland, and again it was hard fighting. So, you know, at the time there was some nasty reports referring to people who were involved in the under the belly attack in Europe, in Sicily, Italy, as D-Day Dodgers, because they fought in Sicily and Italy. They weren't involved in the D-Day, the landing in France, where, of course, which was a very bloody assault, and a lot of men died, but a lot of men died in Italy and Sicily as well. So it was a very unkind remark, and you might have heard the song. I'm thinking of an extract where they say one of the verses of the D-Day Dodgers, "Dear Lady Astor." Supposedly, she's the one who came up with the term. You think you know a lot, standing on the soapbox, talking Tommy rot. You're England's sweetheart and their pride. We think your mouth's too bloody wide. That's from your D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. And then it goes on, you know, look across the mountain through the pouring rain, see the whitened crosses, some that have no name. Heartache and pain, suffering gone, the boys beneath them boulder on. Those are your D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. So the remark wasn't appreciated, obviously. Chubby Power. Chubby was born in Silbury. He was MP for Quebec South for a very long time, as you see, 1917 to 1955. He was always popular among the Irish. He was decorated with the Military Cross in World War I. Ever after World War I, he voiced his dislike of officers. He referred to as brass hats. he was a Canadian nationalist and very much for the development of Canadian armed forces, but he didn't believe in conscription. I would say, because he did write a book, called A Party Politician, his memoirs, and it's very well written. If you get a chance, you should read it sometime. And I would say that after, he says after Dunkirk, and he started to believe in conscription because he thought things were going very badly. But at the same time, he knew his constituency, Quebec. When I say his constituency, I'm not just talking about Quebec South. I'm talking about, he knew his party, the Liberal Party, were in power at the time under Godbout. And King, of course, in Ottawa. The Liberals were in power in Ottawa too. And he knew they had made a commitment to Quebec not to carry through conscription. He was the Minister of Pensions and National Health from 35 to 39, Postmaster General in 39 to 40, and Minister of National Defence for Air from 1940 to 44, where he promoted the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, where they brought in men from all over the Commonwealth and trained them as pilots. And that was really the expansion of the Canadian Air Force into something meaningful. And but then he retired. He resigned when they did start conscripting people. Eventually, after the war, he got back into the party. He was reinstated. He kept getting elected, and finally, he became a senator. Another family, the Mars. Jack taught me a little bit of guitar playing, a little bit of Irish dancing. He was in the Air Force. His brother Oni was a pilot. He died in a mid-air crash. He had been a rifleman with the 8th Royal Rifles in Quebec City. You have to understand that not all the Royal Rifles went off to Hong Kong. Louise, another one of the Mars, was in the Women's Division, RCAF. I'd never heard about this group before. They were called WWII. Women's Division. She worked as a telephone wireless operator and sang for the troops. The O'Briens. Roger was an aviator involved in dozens of bombing missions over Germany. After the Battle of the Atlantic, prior to the D-Day landing, the Allies finally gained air superiority and started bombing the heck out of Germany. Mark, you might know Mark O'Brien. His father, Mark, was also in the army at the time, but he served on this side of the water. A lot of men were in uniform, were in the forces, but they were not necessarily in Europe. And Jerry, another, I know Jerry well enough. He was a friend of my uncle's, and he came in here and gave us a talk. He was very amusing. He was a boxer. He used to box at St. Pat's, yeah. And he was a telegrapher. I don't know if he telegraphed his the Powers. Jerry Power started teaching with me at St. Pat's. A friend of mine, a year or two younger, he caught up to me in high school. I spent a good time in high school. That's one of the reasons why Brother Henchy sent me home. I was having too good a time. Anyway, his father, this is Joe Power, Mannix Power, and Skip Power. Skip is Jerry's father, my friend's father, and at the time the picture was taken, Skip was AWOL, away without leave. They used to live down on Champlain Street. So he was in town, the boys got together. Mannix worked at the arsenal. Joe was in the Navy from 1941, 42 until 1945. Joe had to be carried from the taxi because I guess the boys got together and had a good time. You know? Joe was in the Navy from 41 to 42 until 1945. He was underage at the time, so Skip's brother-in-law, Dave Hughes, also a sailor, faked Granny Power's signature to get him in. One of my longtime friends, Rick Hughes, not here tonight, but that's his father, Jim Hughes. He used to live out on Late Street in Sillery. He went to Sicily, and he was used to drive a motorbike, running messages. He was not right up at the front. Frank Coveney, the son of Bob Coveney, I used to know at St. Pat's, and Frank used to be a member of Irish Heritage Quebec, and you might remember Charlie Coveney, his brother. Frank had played on the Young Sons of Ireland, which again was another casualty of the Second World War. I'll explain. Well, all the young boys went away, so had a hard time keeping hockey teams together. Luann O'Connell sent me pictures of her people, and among them Harold Shields from Quebec City, Arthur Brown from Quebec City. You'll find them on the Roll of Honor. You'll find all these guys on the Roll of Honor. And you can be sure there's some guys from Quebec City, Irish guys from the community who never made it to the Roll of Honor. They just didn't bother turning in their name. Or maybe they never graduated at St. Pat's, you know. They might have given up at grade 8. I remember going to school with guys who disappeared in grade 8. I mean, I don't mean they really disappeared, but they stopped going to school. The O'Connells. Jack O'Connell used to hang around my Uncle Pat Lonergan, and he was a military policeman in Normandy, Holland. And his cousin, Tom O'Connell, is, you may know, Bill O'Connell, used to teach at St. Pat's, a very athletic fellow. There's Bill, Steve, Glenn, Sandra. Mary?
Barry.
Different family. Yeah, there's more than one O'Connell family in Quebec City. Yeah. Yeah, these are O'Connells from Champlain Street, and they still have the house down on Champlain Street, nice stone house. So Tom was in the Navy. One of the war's last casualties, you might have been here before, where I gave me and John O'Connor gave a talk about Francis Joseph Burke Fitzgerald. They were looking for a picture for him for ages. The people in Holland were looking for a picture. And Barbara Mullally, the girl who used to live down the street from me, looked for it for months, and finally she found it. So he died April 28th, a few days before the end of the war. Very tragic. This is the inspection in the schoolyard in 1942. Whoa. That's Brother Rayfield, the man who sent me home. That's Brother George, who was heavily involved with the cadets. He was born in England. I'd say his mother was Irish. It's Brother Leo. He was there when I was in grade 3. I came into the school, and he'd known my Uncle Jack, and I guess him and Jack didn't get along, because he says to my mother, he said, "What's his name?" She said, "Lonergan, Joe Lonergan." "Oh," he said, "he wouldn't by any chance be related to that terrible man, Jack Lonergan." And my mother said, it's his nephew, so he didn't say anything after that. That's peeking out behind there is John Sheehy. Some of you might recognize the face. The other men, I'm sorry because I'm too young. I don't know who they are. I can't recognize them. I can't identify them. This boy would have been the commanding officer of the Cadet Corps at the time. That's the old uniform that they had adopted in the 1930s. They get rid of them about a year after that. They start wearing regular Canadian attire. And they already have the Royal Rifles hat badge on. Because previous to that, they had the Shamrock. Gilles Bertrand, good Irish name, but he's on the honor roll. There's a number of French Canadian boys who were going to St. Pat's, and they joined the forces. And in any case, Gilles married an Irish girl from New Brunswick, and 3 of his sisters married servicemen, including what's her name? Geneviève. Geneviève Bertrand married Paul Derwin, and he's on the list. The reason why I know all this stuff is because Gilles Bertrand is my wife's uncle. You know? I have to go home tonight, so I better say something. So he was in the Air Force.
Was he related to Joe Bertrand?
Joe Bertrand? No, I don't know of any Joe Bertrand in that family.
He played football with me.
Okay. Yeah.
But he disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was no Joe Bertrand in that family. It was only
Could have been his father.
him and Jacques. Oh no, his father was Dominic. Joseph Patrick Sutcliffe. I had a hard time getting his picture. I had a picture of him when I interviewed him. I had put a picture up that I don't know who took the picture, but he's about 96-year-old at that time. And but here's a young man. Okay, as I say, he joined the Royal Rifles of Canada in 1938, and he didn't quite make it to 100 years old, but he did well. He was clearing mines in Normandy. He used to sing in the choir with me. And he told me a guy ahead of him went up and picked up a box, and he just disintegrated from the waist down. So he saw terrible things. He was crossing into the Rhine in a boat in Germany with the infantry, and he was talking to the man in front of him, and then he realized the man in front of him was dead. You know, he was wondering why he was getting no answer. But again, you know, the Irish of Quebec City is funny. I remember I was in the choir, I was sitting behind Joe in the choir, and I'd been going through all the Irish stuff, you know, and police lists, and I said, Joe, I said, did you know that your grandfather used to receive the Fenian newspaper? I said, they get a list, he's on a list in Dublin And the police raided the place. Joe he's in front of me, he starts shaking, laughing, you know. I did my best to find out, because one of the themes of my talk I want to get, you'll see by the end, that the whole Irish community of Quebec City is impacted by the Second World War. Not only the men, a lot of the women, I can't give you numbers, but a lot of the women are working at the arsenal, stuffing bullets into belts and clips, and some of them, I was told, are decoding messages coming in. Someone like the Mara girl were singing for the soldiers. These are Conways, Kileys, Malloys, Nevilles, Stock, who are working in the arsenal. There was a Canadian arsenal down in Artillery Park, on that little street arsenal. If you see it near the, well, it comes up to behind the walls, St. John's Gate, yeah. And so an awful lot of people are involved. The Coughlin's. Jerry Coughlin and Beth Cuthbert, they get married toward the end of the war in 1945. I got the picture from Lorne Coughlin, who used to teach with me at St. Pat's. He teaches. I'm sorry, Lorne Coughlin teaches at. He used to teach at St. Lawrence. He taught 1 year, I think, at St. Pat's with me. And there were an awful lot of Coughlin boys, okay? I knew Kenny Coughlin, where it says just back from Italy. I knew Sam Coughlin. I didn't really know Lauren's father. I knew of him, but I didn't really know him. I really know Sam and Jerry. Some were still not home in February 1946. Dear Mom and Dad, pretty hard to read, but basically the boy is writing back, and he's in Germany, and he's at one point he says he's visiting Berchtesgaden, where Hitler used to have his redoubt, his personal little lair headquarters. And then he ends up talking about the girls. What's he say? In France, I was interpreter for the squadron, and on the train, the captain had to out a couple of times. But here I'm lost. I did pretty well in France. Their French isn't different from Quebecese. So I don't know if you speak Quebecese, but I'm hoping to get sent back to France. He's not having much luck with the German girls. So this is in 1946 in the Patrician Herald. Again, you see the boys. That's the altar at the basement church of St. Patrick's. Many of you were baptized there. Okay, and I don't know if that's an actual coffin or a make-up coffin with the Union Jack on top of it. Social impact. Estimate of Quebec City's Irish population 1941. I could revise that upward. My source for the figures are there was some guy, a priest, his name was John Forrest Calvin. He was from the Order of Franciscan Missionaries. And he writes a thing about the Irish in Quebec City. And he traces their numbers, and it goes down. But from 1921 to 41, it's holding pretty steady. By 1942, 723 St. Patrick's grads were in the forces. 398 in the Army, 134 in the Navy, 191 in the Air Force. Okay, I get those statistics from 1942. So more of them joined in 1943 and 1945. Some of them, I guess, are conscripted by 1945. So I would give, I'm a rough estimate, throw in another 50 for each year. So that takes you up to 773. Something wrong there. Yeah, 773, okay. Now, give them each 2 parents, give them each a couple siblings, and mind you, people had more kids than they do now. And that takes you up to 308.75, which tops, greater than the figure on top. So you can understand that it's impacting everybody, just about everybody in the city. There's the old changes that come. The old cadet badge, Aaron Go Bra, and then they go to Volans et Valens, willing and able, with the Royal Rifles. That's Brother George again in the back, 1942. And the Hibernian Cadet Corps becomes St. Patrick's Cadet Corps. So the Irish became more and more Canadian, which is natural for any immigrant group. God Save the King was found to replace God Save Ireland in the programs at the end of the celebrations. The men's Ancient Order of Hibernians faded away in Quebec City, although the ladies' auxiliary of the Ancient Order of Hibernians hung around till about 1970. The Young Sons of Ireland hockey team died in 1941, and the St. Patrick's Literary Institute died in 1945. Except, so everything was getting less Irish, except perhaps on St. Patrick's Day. Okay? Aaron Go Bra comes back. This is again, this is March 1946. Anecdotes and carryover. I remember my mother telling me that toward the beginning of the war, I guess it was at St. Patrick's Recreation Center, my parents got married in 1942. A couple of years after the war started, and they were Irish nationalists, and they're kind of disappointed when they go around and they see the Union Jack all over the place. And they went to a dance, and they were congratulating them each other that there were no Union Jacks around. They were dancing until one of them, I don't know, my mother to my father remarked, they couldn't see the forest for the trees. The whole wall was a Union Jack. Okay, another thing about the war, weird side of it. When the war came, a lot of men lost their jobs. A lot of women lost their jobs. That their financial situation deteriorated for some people. Some of you may remember ration tickets. I don't. I think I tore them up in my parents or something. My sister remembers them. I remember driving along in a truck with my friend Bobby Doherty, with his dad Bill Doherty, who's on the list, and he was singing rats as big as alley cats in the quartermaster stores. He was obviously back in the Second World War. He'd been in the Air Force. I know he had dated one of that other guy I showed you, Gilles Bertrand there, my wife's uncle. He had dated one of that guy's sisters too. Of course, I wasn't there, but we all grew up with toys, okay, that were reflections of the Second World War. Little plastic soldiers and tanks and B-25s and all kinds of sub-model airplanes that we put together. TV programs, movies, The Longest Day, combat, old uncles and fathers going off to the Legion. And me and the boys around my place, often we'd head down for Armistice Day, not because we were that patriotic, but we just liked the parade, to go down to see the on Remembrance Day. And you'd hear all the talk. There was the good war, one hell of a war, the big one. That's an image of what I have up here that you can examine at your leisure if you want. You might find some relations. And I was in the Cadet Corps. We all were in the Cadet Corps. I ended up being an RSM, then I was a commanding officer of the Cadet Corps. But well before that, when we'd go to the inspections every year in May, the most solemn part of the inspection was they'd put out all the lights, and there'd just be a cross like that in the drill hall. This picture is actually from the schoolyard, when they had an inspection in the schoolyard. But they used to do in the drill hall too, and one of the cadets would, they call out the color party, and they play the last post. It was very moving. Okay, so, yes, Pat?
Joe, they also mentioned all the names of the students that had passed away during the war when they did that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I know you've heard in Flanders Fields, so I'm just going to recite a poem I put together myself to gather up the thoughts of my personal presentation on World War II. Here's to men I've met who managed to come home, who left some youthful years in Europe or Hong Kong, with friends and foes who died there in their sight, in rubble, sand, or mountainside, a field, or on some deck, their innocence a victim in the fight. Here's to men who swallowed their fear of the void, where it hid unrelenting in their stomachs, and when their feet touched home and done with war, their eyes revealed a sadness, love, or stone, as they watched their children reaching for a star. Here's to men who wore or shunned their ribbons, who sighed or drank away their contradictions, remembering a friend in some unknown plot, at home or at the Legion or in ranks by cenotaphs where poppies signed, "Remember us, we fought." Thank you.